We start off with a stunning market turnaround today. Stocks selling off early in the session following a tweet from President Trump about increasing Chinese tariffs, escalating the stakes in the trade talks with China. But stocks climbed their way back and jumped into the close on reports the Chinese delegation will still travel to the U.S. for trade talks this week. And we just heard we are expecting some sort of update from Treasury Secretary Mnuchin shortly, so we will keep you updated with the very latest. In the meantime, is today's action proof that this is a buy the dip market? Guy.
Yes, well, yes, it is proof. I mean, it doesn't mean that I believe it. Doesn't mean it should have happened. You know, if we had this conversation last night and we had the exact same set of circumstances, I would say the market's going to open on the lows, continue to trade lower the rest of the day, despite any headlines that came out. And here we are. We open on the lows and rally back the rest of the day. So the market seems impervious to all this stuff. But I'll say it again, and I've said it for quite some time. I think we all believe, at least most people believe, that when a deal is ready to be made, President Trump wants to pull the trigger, there is a deal that will be made. I don't believe that. I don't think the Chinese have any interest in making a deal, nor should they, quite frankly, in the current environment. So I do think this is going to continue to drag out. And at a certain point, it's going to matter for the market.
We do know, at the very least, the Chinese delegation is going to come to to Washington this week. The vice premier may not be in attendance. We don't know that yet. But isn't that a sign that the Chinese are still committed to these talks and making sure that at least progress is not lost necessarily?
Yeah, look, and Chinese that have said very clearly, we're never going to negotiate with a gun to our head. So the sense must be, if they're still coming, at least the markets want to believe this. And this was really the breakneck rally into kind of the second half of the day after meandering some of the morning. So, yeah, if you want to follow those dynamics at work, I kind of agree with Guy's, kind of eventual dynamic with the market. But I would take the other side.
Sorry, guys, we got breaking news out of Washington. Let's get to Kayla Tausche for the details. Kayla.
I just left a meeting with the U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Lighthizer and the Treasury Secretary Melissa, where they confirmed that the increase in tariffs will go into effect Friday at 12:01. So at the end of the day on Thursday, Ambassador Lighthizer saying that he is going to be putting out the paperwork to effect that in the next day or so. They said that over the weekend there was a substantial retreat on behalf of China, where they backtracked on commitments that underpinned the entire deal. The Treasury Secretary called it a big change in direction in a process that he said had been making substantial progress. Both cabinet officials said that the president was willing to extend the truce with China and hold off on increasing these tariffs so long as talks continued to make progress. And when these two negotiators told the president over the weekend that China had been retreating, that there was a significant backsliding on some of these issues, that the president was committed to putting this tariff increase in place at the end of the day Friday. That being said, the Treasury Secretary said there's an opportunity for talks to get back on track. They didn't talk about the likelihood of a deal happening this week, this month, this year, but he said there was an opportunity for talks to get back on track. The Vice Premier of China is expected to come to Washington as part of this delegation. He will be arriving Thursday with those talks happening Thursday evening and Friday, although you'll note that that timing does intersect with those tariffs already being put in place, those higher tariffs. So certainly, Melissa, it would seem that that genie is not going to get put back into the bottle. The tariffs will be going up Thursday evening, even as U.S. officials are optimistic that there could still be progress made.
Any word, Kayla, on the additional $325 billion in Chinese goods that could be targeted?
No comment on the additional imports of Chinese goods. Specifically, the administration wants to focus on this increase in tariffs. There is a hope, at least an unspoken belief, that maybe this will be the leverage needed to get China to commit to what it had committed to before that was backtracked on over the weekend. But we will see later this week.
All right, Kayla, thank you. Kayla Tausche with the very latest. So again, the tariffs that were 10% go up to 25% come Friday. And also we understand that the vice premier will, in fact, be along with the Chinese delegation in Washington for the next round of trade talks. We saw the SPY ETF trade lower in the after-hour session. Yeah. BK, so what's your take?
Well, it did initially, but here's the market wants to see progress. Now, to Guy's point, at some point in time it matters, but right now, as long as there's progress, and the fact that the Chinese are still coming is progress. This is not the best news out there, but if it's part of the negotiating process, then I think we're okay. If you have a sustained tariffs at 25%, a sustained trade war, that will erode confidence in this and the market will go down. But as long as there's progress, I think you're okay.
Yeah, well, we all were, before this 325 number was kind of bandied about here, we were already asking the question, what's going to happen to the tariffs that had already been put in place last year? And they were likely to stay in place. So if we get to this very narrow deadline on Thursday evening at midnight and there's new tariffs, this is an impact on global growth. It's just that simple. And one of the things that we kept on hearing throughout earnings season, going back to January when it was Q4 and then Q1 guidance that we just got, there's a level of uncertainty about these actual tariffs. So the likelihood that the global economy is going to turn on a dime when we get a deal is not great because these tariffs are not going to come up. And it's also really important to remember that one of the mechanisms that was put in place to kind of help us or help the Chinese comply with these deals was the TPP, and that was ripped up. So all these issues are really important issues. These tariffs are likely to stick around for a while.
What's really interesting is this all comes from the Trump administration, again, when markets essentially are at all-time highs and there's some sense of euphoria. There's some sense of we've got some room to do this. It's time for some tough love. And this is exactly where we were in January 26th, essentially right after that blow off top. It was probably February and definitely, first couple days of March where we started to get the real tariff talk, but we already started to get there. If you look at where the S&P was on April 30th, you had a 78 nine-day RSI, which means effectively stocks were way overbought just a few days ago. So if you look at almost every indicator, that's really where I think if you're a pessimist here about what the administration is going to do, right now they feel like it's more politically expedient to get the points of saying, hey, you know what? We're gonna negotiate tough. You backed out of your deal. Guess what? This and that. And
he's getting the points among his base, but he's also getting the points among Democrats who also back the harder stance that he is taking on the Chinese. So we are here at record highs, as Tim had mentioned. We've got a 3.2% GDP print. We've got inflation that's extremely tame. Why not drag this out? Why not be the tough guy? He's winning points on all sides.
Especially if the market's not going to react in a very negative way. The fact that the market came back today and effectively closed unchanged. I get it wasn't unchanged, but effectively unchanged. That's got to embolden the president. He's got to look at today's action and say, guess what? Maybe I do have some equity to play with in terms of what I can do with my rhetoric and what the stock market will do.
Yeah, but the problem is the longer you drag it out, then it does impact the market, and he's the stock market president. So let's just say if I'm the Chinese and I see all of a sudden the U.S. stock market falling, that puts more pressure on this president to cut a deal. So there's a small window here for this tactic.
At the same time, didn't we stare into the abyss of the potential of increased tariffs this morning? I mean, don't we know what the market reaction is? And it wasn't that bad. I mean, Dow down 470 at the low.
Down 2%.
Was it that bad?
Look, the market
off of record highs?
Yeah, but down 2% in a volatility environment that's been basically zero. That was a big move for this market. So I actually think the market did react appropriately this morning.
I think it was an appropriate, first response. And again, these are tweets from over the weekend that could have been just, up late, bored, needing some popcorn. I don't know. But, we've seen this before. And if suddenly Chinese are showing up today, market rallies back, this could have been just that, except for it's not. And I think this is the dynamic that markets really need to think about. Expect the unexpected. And this is a case where, look at global PMIs. There were some, and in Asia last night, there were some awful numbers out last night. The European PMIs this morning were not very good. So there's certainly this tenuous global economy that I agree. I think everyone on the desk is saying this is probably not a great time to be doing that.
Well, here's your number. I mean, just look for in the next couple of days, we're likely to have volatility. We're not going to get any big announcements. We know that this delegation is coming, but we also know that you have this deadline at midnight on Thursday. I think as we get close to that, if we break today's low, I mean, that's the level where, you want to be a little bit careful because we could have a 3 to 5% pullback, especially if you think that a good portion of these tariffs are going to stick around for the rest of the year.
28.98 on the S&P 500. That was today's lowest. Yep.